Hello, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. If you'd like to say hello, you can let us know where you're joining us from in the chat box. Hello, we're going to get started in just a couple seconds. So we have folks from both coasts joining us. Great. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Your phone line is muted. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available. Welcome to our webinar on when schools are closed. My name is Leslie Gabay-Swanston. I'm the Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. Before we get started, here's an overview of our discussion today. First, I'll share a little bit about NSLA and why we believe summers are so important. We'll hear from our moderator, Kim Toledo, and our author, Dr. Matthew Boulay. We'll have time for some of your questions, and after that, we'll wrap up with some announcements.
Thanks for that introduction, Leslie.
As we're going along, if you have any questions for the panelists, please put those in the Q&A box. I'll try to catch them if they're in the chat box as well, but if you want your question asked and answered live, please put it in the Q&A box. So a little bit about the National Summer Learning Association. NSLA is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on increasing access to summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning programs. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, offers expertise and support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution for equity and excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Through our work, we aim to have an impact on the lives of the most vulnerable students by addressing summer learning loss and closing the achievement and opportunity gaps. So why do we believe summer is such an important time? We know that summer is a time of great inequity for young people, and we believe that promoting and supporting summer opportunities is a way to address this. This goes beyond the summer learning that's in our name. We also want to see programs and communities addressing access to other resources like meals and youth employment. Summer is a unique time and an under-leveraged time for both youth and adults. Summer is a time for improvement. It's a time to catch up, but also a time to develop new skills. It's a time for innovation and exploration, for trying out new ideas and strategies without some of the constraints of the school year. Summer is a time for integration and building new partnerships. And finally, summer is a time for activities that can have both immediate and long-term impact on the lives of youth. So some of you are probably familiar with the idea of summer learning loss, but for those of you who are not, I wanted to share this graphic. What you'll see here are two lines, the purple line representing low-income students and the orange line representing middle-income students. And you'll see on the left that both groups start out roughly at the same level and are learning at the same rate during the school year. It's during the 2 to 3 months of summer when, without any type of intervention, we see low-income students losing some of the gains made during the school year, while the middle-income peers continue to gain. This starts the low-income youths a little further behind their peers each school year. This pattern repeats summer after summer, creating an achievement gap. But really, that achievement gap can be thought of as an opportunity gap. because it's missing out on those opportunities to learn, explore, and have new experiences that puts children further behind. And you can imagine with our current situation with COVID-19 and students being away from school for an additional 2 to 3 months on top of the normal 2 to 3 months of summer, researchers are projecting an even greater impact, not only on the academic achievement of students, but on their physical, social, and emotional well-being as well. So I'd like to also briefly touch on a little bit more of the research and data that has been collected on summer and summer learning. 1/3 of households have at least one child that participates in the summer program. And for those not participating, 51% said that they would if a program was available to them. The average cost per week for a child in the summer program was $288. Looking at the health impact, we see two sides of the same coin, with only 1 in 6 children who qualify for free reduced lunch during the school year are receiving those same services during the summer. We also see minority children gaining weight up to twice as fast during the summer compared to the school year. Now, these stats are a few years old, and we're in the process with other out-of-school time organizations of updating this data. But while I could say that anecdotally we've seen the situation steadily improving, it's still not nearly where we would like it to be. So what can we do to help address this situation? That's going to be the topic of our discussion today. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. Kim Toledo writes about early childhood development, well-being, and education for the Sarasota Herald Tribune in Florida, and is the new COVID-19 homeschooler of a 9-year-old in 3rd grade. Her stories range from highlighting early brain science research to access to affordable health care. So with that, I'll turn things over to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Leslie, for that introduction. So here we are at the end of May already. School's been out where I am in Florida for a couple of weeks now and won't open up again till August and September. I'm sure that differs for all of you. I've been working through from home with my 8-year-old just turned 9 and trying to keep up with becoming a sudden homeschooler, working from home and learning all of the intricacies of Zoom and how to be a secretary for my son and how to bribe him to do things and how to keep him on task. And I'm not good at it. It's been very stressful, but at least there was that anchor of his teachers sending us to-do lists and tasks, and now that's gone, there's even less of a structure in the home because I'm not so great at structure either. And so as someone who covers children's education, I'd use the National Summer Learning Association often for data. It's a great resource for writers. And I interviewed Dr. Matthew Boulay in the past, and with the shutdown and everything going on, I knew he'd be a great source of information on what to do with all of these months out of school and summer camp not really being a reality this year. Many of them still closed. And so if he could help me, I wanted to see what he had to offer, and he was writing an ebook. Lucky me. So Matthew, can you tell us a little bit about that book? And also, before that though, you are also a parent, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how that's been looking for you in your household?
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and you're very honest. It is hard. I think the whole country is suddenly struggling with a situation that was totally unanticipated as recently as 6 months ago. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. The 14-year-old had a COVID birthday, you know, which was basically just us, the four of us. And the school, for my kids, schools closed down in middle of March, right before spring break. But it really took about 4 weeks for the school system to get up and running with any kind of contact or even digital learning. In about week 3, teachers started to reach out to the kids and just sort of check in. They offered Chromebooks, they offered free meals, but then the digital learning started about a week later. So it was a gap of, you know, of 4 weeks. I think honestly, you know, we like to laugh about teenagers, and teenagers get a bad rap. I think it's honestly a little easier for me to have teenagers than if I had you know, a 5 or 6 year old. I remember what my kids were like then, and they have some independence now. So it's a whole different set of challenges, but we're making the most of it.
How did you, I mean, with all that going on, how did you find the time? When did you start writing the book to address all of this?
You know, so we've been studying summer learning loss and summer learning for 25 years. And summer learning is really a period when schools are closed. That's what summer means in America. Schools are closed. And so the question's first about learning, but then it's about all the other ways that school affects our lives. And so it was actually on a conference call with my colleagues at NSLA on April 1st that I had this realization that this summer was going to be, you know, harder for parents than ever before. And so I started writing at 11 p.m. on April 1st, and
Wow, 2 months.
2 months, and you know, the only way you can pull something like this off in 2 months is you have, you know, kind of a team. So I had research assistants working on, you know, research in one section while I would be writing another section, and then as I finished, I would send it out for editing. So you're sort of simultaneously juggling all these different parts of the process.
Well, you definitely delivered because we need it now. And that's great news. So the book, let's talk about the book. It's basically three main parts. There's the research on the summer learning loss. And then there are 9 principles for parents.
Yep.
And then these digital learning toolkits, where
Right.
because it's kind of where the action is, if you will. So I'd like to talk about each of these, but first, you use a phrase I'd like to ask you about, which is the absence of schooling America. Can you explain what that means to you, please?
Yeah, you know, sometimes we talk about summer learning loss, which really focuses on what is happening to kids academically. It's that slide that Leslie showed, where schools are fostering learning, so children are increasing academically in the school year, as we would expect, and then kids drop off over the summer. And of course, our most vulnerable kids, our kids in poverty, are the ones who experience the most severe learning setback. But really, when I talk about the absence of schooling, it's a much broader understanding of all of the roles that school plays in our society. You know, and I think that's what is so hard for everybody now. That's what we're experiencing. That schooling certainly is meant to educate our kids and to transmit knowledge and information. But really, that's only a small part of what schooling does, right? Schooling, you know, it provides safe, caring childcare while all of us work. And that's why all of us now, when we're working, we have our kids on our laps or in the background. Schooling structures our children's daily lives. So they go to bed at a certain time and they wake up at a certain time. And so in the absence of schooling, a lot of that structure is lost. I know my kids are staying up much later now than they would if this was a normal May. And that means they sleep in later. And then they sort of miss breakfast, and so and then they have Pringles instead of, and that's what the absence of schooling means. It's all of the ways that school functions in our society, and I think that's what what so many of us are really struggling with now.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've had cupcakes for breakfast a couple of times over here. So you kind of touch upon that in your principles, which as a mom, I really appreciated. So it wasn't all about academia per se, because I think that's the first thing that occurs to me as I worry about summer slide and now COVID slide, compounding, all of that. So can you tell me about the principles that are not just ABCs 1, 2, 3s, and why those ones are important?
Yeah, and I think this is how parents think about, before parents even get to questions of learning. And this is true in past summers, but it's acutely true now. Parents want their kids to be safe. They want them to be safe while they're working, right? They want them to have access to food, right? And for many millions of kids who live in poverty, schools provide breakfast, and they provide lunch, and they even provide afternoon and evening meals or snacks. So long before we get to questions of learning, there are these other questions about the whole child, and that also includes children feeling connected. Right? One of the things schooling does is give kids a chance to play with their classmates and see their peers and see other caring, loving adults in their teachers and principals. So these principles are really to sort of fill the gap for the framework around what the absence of schooling has left us, that void. So the first one, summer learning is not summer school. We've said this for years with NSLA, and really the best programs, the best summer programs in years past are ones that feel exciting and very active to kids and are not like summer school. There's a story I tell years ago. I was an elementary school teacher, and I was telling my students that I was going to be gone the next day because I was going to a conference on summer learning. And a little girl in the front row, a quiet little girl, Letitia, was shaking her head. And I said, "What's wrong, Letitia?" And she said, "Summer school, that's evil." And I think that's how most of America thinks of summer school. And the field of summer learning has really tried to say, we're not about kids sitting in desks as an extension of the school year. It's really about active, engaged learning. So it's meant to be a message to parents, like, you don't have to teach your kids trigonometry this summer. You don't have to teach them French or advanced chemistry, right? The goal really is much more simple and hopefully much more fun. And that's to pique their interest with learning activities that are, really in line with their own passions and interests as kids.
That's awesome. Thank you. And so the digital kits, that's kind of the next part of the book. That is where the action is, if you will. That's where the adventures begin, if you will. And I love the anecdote in your book when you speak about a mom, I think it was a mother, telling you that her son aspired to be a caveman. Is that right? And that's a bit unusual for as far as aspirations go, but it's not something you shot down. It was valid, right? And so what's the best way for a parent to sort of treat that desire in their child, and how they could connect that to the kids in summer learning?
Yeah, and really the message is to embrace that, right? And this mother was telling the story, and we were talking about the hopes and dreams of our children, and lots of people wanted to be, their kids wanted to be president of the United States or be a doctor or a lawyer or a police officer. And she said, you know, sheepishly that her kid wanted to be a caveman. But if you think about that, not as a career goal, but as an insight into the child's mind, and what 8-year-old, you know, doesn't want to be a caveman, right? I mean, that's pretty cool. So then you know, figure out the ways to translate that interest into learning activities. For example, you know, there's plenty of information on, you know, the lives of the Neanderthals, or cave art, right? Our earliest art is those drawings of the caveman, or by the cavemen. You know, and then you know, the history of how we discovered the lives of the cavemen, and the anthropological work around how they developed tools and used fire. And there are plenty of, you know, in more normal times, I'd say go to a library, you can find dozens of books about all of these things that are age appropriate and interesting for kids. Now we have to do it digitally, but there's tons of resources. I mean, National Geographic for kids is a great place to start. It's what I try to do in the toolkits, was really sort of curate online learning materials from the perspective of a child, right? And so it is not a textbook, it's not linear. You don't have to learn, you know, how to capitalize a letter and then how to use punctuation at the end of the sentence and so on. It is really like, if you're interested in being a caveman, then jump over to where cavemen lived, and then jump over to art of the cavemen. And then maybe that takes you to a children's museum where there's science as well. And all of that happens in 30 minutes, right? If the kid is engaged and passionate, you know, making connections, then that's learning, right? That's what learning is. And moreover, that sort of learning is going to, you know, be sort of an entree to lifelong learning. Because what you're really teaching the child is you can pursue your own interests. I'll help you. I, as a parent, will sit with you and encourage it. I will affirm it. There's that human bond and human connection. So it could be cavemen, it could be humpback whales, you know, it could be how to build a bridge with straws. But it is that time spent together affirming their interests.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff in there. I personally a big fan of your yoga toolkit. We could all use a little bit
And
of
who
that.
doesn't, right, just need their kids to sort of practice a little mindfulness, a little.
Yeah, I kind of thought you were speaking to me.
But one of the points about that is that one of the things we forget schooling does is it gives kids, particularly in the elementary grades and middle grades, access to daily activity. Right? And kids, we know from years past that kids actually experience unhealthy weight gains during the summer on one end of the spectrum, or hunger on the other end of the spectrum. And that's the hunger is about not being able to access food. But the unhealthy weight gain is that, you know, kids have gym class, right? And they run around on the playground. And during the school year, those things are just a normal part of their daily activity. But during the summer months, and now with schools closed, I mean, in my community, the school district has actually locked off playgrounds and said, you know, they're closed for health reasons. And parks have been closed also. You know, so how do kids have some daily activity? Maybe it's in the confines of your own, you know, living room. But yoga is a good place to start. There's all sorts of other more active stuff, but thinking about how to give kids some daily exercise is an important part of this.
And I mean, I love the engagement piece. For instance, I'm an avid cook. We love to chef together. I love your toolkit touching on that. But are there some that you would say I can, you know, as a mom who's still having to work from home, are there some of the toolkits that I need walk away from? So kind of put in front of them. And of course, this is not ideal, but sometimes it has to happen. Do you think some of them can be used that way?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're all wrestling with how much screen time,
Yeah.
is too much.
Mhm.
And what the American Association of Pediatricians recommended, this is 2 years ago in 2018, is that it's really about the quality of the screen time as opposed to the quantity.
Mm.
And so, high quality is how, frankly, most of our kids are going to learn over the next few weeks and months, or have been learning. So depending on your child and their age and their, some kids get on the internet, or, and they sort of stay on that site. And I have one daughter who does that. And other kids get on the internet and they click from here to here to here to here to here. And I have another daughter who does that. And sometimes, depending on the age, that can lead them far astray. So it is important for parents certainly to check in on their kids, sit next to them if they can, but to not be too far away, I think, for any online activity. The toolkits themselves are meant to be sort of begun parent with child, and spark a little bit of interest in the child, and then they can sort of click through, what are literally hours of activities within each toolkit. And sometimes it's a short video, sometimes it's a hands-on activity, that's modeled with an online lesson, but it's meant to be all high quality, and sort of aggressively exposing kids to lots of ideas, because I think that's something that, when we're quarantined in our own homes, our world feels very small. And so there's a lot about virtual travel. You can visit the country of Bhutan in the Himalayas, and you can visit China, and you can visit South America, but it's trying to give kids a sense of the whole world out there, even when we're staying pretty close to home these days.
And how do you think, like logistically, especially for someone like me who's not, great at timing things out and scheduling, would you say, does a toolkit look like it takes a whole day, or does it something that takes like a week?
Yeah. I think the answer could be either. There are 40 toolkits, which, if you start June 1st, gets you through, the middle of July. And if I can, I'll write volume number 2 for, July 15th through August. But certainly one approach is like one toolkit a day. It's a different idea. And if your kid, again, it so much depends on the kid. Some kids will take an idea and just stay with it for day after day after day. And other kids jump, from idea to idea to idea. But I think you can sort of follow your kid's interest level. And when they're starting to get excited about something, give them more and more of that. If they're bored by it, then move on. It's totally okay to not finish a toolkit or to not finish an activity. When I was teaching, I used to tell the kids that they didn't have to finish a book if they didn't want to. And some of the kids were surprised by that. They felt like that was cheating, right? Oh, I thought if we had a book, we had to. But I start books all the time that I don't finish. If they're boring, I don't want to keep going. Why make a kid keep going, right? Particularly in this at-home learning environment. So it's really about, piquing your child's interest as opposed to mandating, what they do.
Absolutely. And I do also like for us, the grandparents are playing a big role, or used to, rather, right? And that's kind of been cut down quite a bit. And are these toolkits something you could kind of share with, the helpers in a child's life, whether they be grandparents or maybe even peers from class they want to stay in touch with? Are they shareable that way, that they can maybe even work on things sort of together, but not, online?
Yes, absolutely. And, my 17-year-old and my 14-year-old helped me edit some of them, right? And one of them, the 17-year-old, said, "Hey, this is the sort of thing that I could, as a high school student, sort of help tutor an elementary kid with, right?" So you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about a particular subject coming to this. It's really about encouraging the child as they go on this journey of self-discovery. So grandparents, yes. You could organize 2 or 3 kids, in a group chat, and they could have an activity together. I think those sort of connections these days we need more than ever. However we can help each other, connect to other humans is a really good thing.
Absolutely. And so you can also share this ebook and the toolkits with like organizations who have had to move their summer camps online.
Yeah.
Maybe even libraries. Could they use this as a resource?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it really, because there are so many links to other online activities, it really works only as an ebook, right? So you don't have to worry about printing it out and handing it out.
Right.
The real challenge, of course, for the country, and this is a challenge for the book that I couldn't overcome, is the digital divide, right? So many millions of our households don't have access to online connection. And that's something that we really need to invest in and figure out. The notion of internet access, realizing it's as important, it's a public good, right? And so we have to figure out how to ensure everyone has access. In the meantime, the phone, a smartphone, this ebook can be used, and most learning sites can be accessed with a smartphone, which is more commonly held by folks. Even if they don't have a tablet or a computer, they're more likely to have a smartphone.
Gotcha. And are all the activities in the toolkit? I mean, there's so many. Are they all free though?
Yeah, it's all free. So the way I curated it was, links only to something that is high quality and age appropriate. So you don't have to worry about your kid clicking on something that isn't appropriate. The scariest thing in there's a section on shipwrecks. And actually there's some amazing sites about sunken ships. And there's the history of the ships. There's exploration of the site itself. So you go down with divers, and you're swimming with the sharks, and you're seeing what the divers are seeing. And then from that, you can go to marine, life and marine plants, and explore some of the science around it. But the scariest video in the whole thing is this 3 or 4 minute clip of these crazy waves out on ocean, and this ship rocking back and forth. And I mention it because it's a ship I'd never want to be on. I mean, it's, but it's also the scare, there's nothing else that, that is, that's going to keep kids up at night or anything like that. The other thing, is to think about, like, Khan Academy is a really terrific site. National Geographic for Kids. Like, if you do nothing else this summer, you don't even have to look at the book. Just go straight to Khan Academy and National Geographic for Kids. And there's literally hundreds of, it's probably thousands of hours of games, activities, lessons, videos that, can keep kids engaged for hours on end.
And speaking to, how everything is age appropriate, what age range would you say this ebook is best used
Yeah. I mean, probably elementary and middle school. I think high schoolers would find the content interesting, but maybe less likely to sort of, you know, take advice from mom and dad that this is something worthwhile for them. I think the right way to approach learning in the home during these difficult times is really around, the topic. Let's not mention learning or homework or schooling or summer learning. Let's say, hey, have you seen this sunken, ship? Have you seen this humpback whale breaching, right? And draw them in a way that is fun, and then you can click to the life cycle of a humpback whale, or the way they live, their diets, and you can move into the science after you grab their interest. So I think there's a lot of interesting things for lots of age groups, but it's really how you approach it. And Kim, I just want to say one more thing on this. I think as a nation, and forgive me for being overly critical, but I think as a nation, we have really failed to invest in parents. And I think one of the things we're realizing in this, is that despite the good intentions of many teachers and many principals who try to foster connection, as well as programs and camps, and there are some great examples, but they're really examples that are few and far between. I really worry that we have not done a good job fostering parent involvement and parent engagement in schooling and learning. And it's part of why I think this is so hard, for parents now. One of the places to begin is with where we're familiar, right? So where you have some structure and routine already. So if you read to your kids at bedtime during the school year, well, read to them when school is closed, right? If you limited screen time during the school year and had rules around bedtime during the school year, then continue those rules, and you can relax them a little bit. But that routine and structure can be a tool for parents and is familiar to students.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been a big loss of the scheduling aspect without school going on. Even the online school offered some of that. So that's some really good advice, I think. Is the ebook available now? And would someone just download it? Where can they?
Well, I think Leslie sent a sample to everybody, which is meant to be meaty. And if you want to just run with the sample, run with the sample. It's available now for pre-order on Amazon. It will be published on Monday, June 1st.
Congratulations. No small feats.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask a question of the audience, Kim?
Absolutely, please.
And hey, Leslie, could you go back to the slide, maybe 4 or 5, that show the learning loss? I just wonder how familiar this sort of slide is to folks. To you personally, if you're an educator or work with children, but also to folks in your community. Are parents, is your community, in your view, generally aware of the summer slide? And what do they know about it and think about it? And how? One of the reasons I asked that is a few years ago, I was talking to a parent of a second grader, and she said, I want my daughter to have a good summer, but what does that even mean? And that's where I started thinking about, like, how have we invested in educating and supporting parents, right? If those are the questions parents are asking, well, we need to do a better job sort of connecting them to to goals, goal setting and planning and resources. So Leslie, I can't see the chat box, but if any feedback is coming in on that question, maybe you could share it.
Yes, we say a couple comments. In general, parents and educators in rural Missouri and Kansas are keenly aware of the slide, especially in middle school.
Mhm.
We're exactly on, we put out press releases about Summer Slide when we promote our public library summer reading program. The Virginia Partnership for Out of School Time has done a great job of educating stakeholders in Virginia about the Summer Slide. We love Blair.
Good, good. You know, well, that's encouraging. Particularly the comments about the rural areas, because I think for a long time, issues of summer learning loss were studied by researchers in urban areas. And to some degree, students in rural areas were largely overlooked. And in normal times, you know, it's a somewhat different problem to connect kids to resources in urban areas versus rural areas, with rural areas having the additional challenge around transportation and distance. So I'm glad to hear, I think that was Missouri, but I'm glad to hear that.
Another comment, we have seen this type of slide and worse in the Bridgeton district. I've been partnering for years and highlighting slide as a tool for parents to not only have students engaged during the summer, but to supplement at home as well. We do a cross-age program to also engage the high school students as mentors to keep them engaged also. Bridgeton is a rural district with an urban designation.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, we have an excellence awards program, which Leslie manages, that every year identifies really sort of the best models for summer learning and high quality programs. So maybe those folks want to apply for next year's excellence award program. The reason for the program is partly to shine a spotlight on high performing programs. And there's a cash grant, $10,000 that comes as an award, but it's really to identify best practices that folks at NSLA can then share, you know, as models for other people around the country.
Yeah. So we have some time now for some questions from the audience. If you have any questions that you want to ask, definitely put those in the Q&A box. As we were planning for this webinar, we were talking about what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure this is a time for you to ask the questions that you have, maybe commiserate a little bit about what's going on. So feel free to share your questions, but also your examples and comments in the chat box. We'd love to hear them and discuss them. So one question that came up was, how can we keep kids engaged in summer learning programming virtually when they are now being overloaded with screen time and virtual programs? So something you're definitely hearing from a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think the answer is so localized, right? I mean, in some places, summer camps are beginning to open. I live in Oregon, and we're beginning to see a path towards camps operating in person, but in different ways than years past. So really smaller cohorts where there's less contact between kids of different cohorts as a way to limit exposure. You know, so I hope we see some more programs being able to open safely. The challenge is that there are probably going to be many fewer slots for kids in-person programs. And so, you know, the recommendation we always make at NSLA is if you can, you know, have access to a high quality program, you know, please enroll. They're fantastic. This summer, the question is, with so many people not having access, what can parents do, you know, at home? And I think that at home learning is going to be led by digital activities, but we can turn off the computer and walk away from the screen and have the sort of download those activities or the ideas for those activities with our kids. So there's, for example, an idea in the toolkit to film your own cooking show, right? It turns out that Americans watch cooking shows more than we actually cook at home. And I'm a little guilty of that. So, you know, there's an idea that you can certainly bake and cook with your kids, but if you have a smartphone, it can be quite fun and educational to sort of create a learning, a cooking show around. So you're baking cookies. How would a host on a cooking show, you know, describe baking cookies, right? You talk about the ingredients and how you're going to produce this wonderful warm, you know, chocolatey center, and you ham it up a little bit, but it suddenly becomes an exercise in kids explaining the directions and a process. And there's a lot of synthesizing, digesting information, you know, when they're doing that. So the point to the question is, you know, bring that idea offline and do it with screens shut off in your own kitchen, you know, parent and child together, or even a couple of siblings together, but without the screen on. Totally not only appropriate, but really a nice reason to shut down screens for a little while.
So this question, I think, either can go for Kim or for Matthew. What are some of the best ways or strategies to communicate this information to parents? I know that parents are getting a lot of information out right now, but what are some of the strategies to use to communicate with parents?
Well, as a parent who's been doing, this may be the same for you, Matthew, but you know, the emails have been really noisy, right? There's been a lot of noise, a lot of stuff coming through. Use this resource, use that resource, or you know, from the school districts, which is helpful, but is oftentimes not very as streamlined as I would have liked it to have been. If I received something from a previous summer camp or our library where we're members and we used to go, I think, you know, I would, because I've assumed, you know, they've been really quiet and I've kind of just shut down. I would click on that and open it. So if it could get, as a parent, if I got it through that channel, like a previous, like I said, a previous like county run summer camp or the library, that would work for us for sure. And then the ebook is nice because it's just all there and it's not, you know, a splatter of different emails linking to different things on different days.
I think it's one of the things parents are feeling is overwhelmed. I mean, on the one hand, sort of isolated. We're all within our own homes, but oddly overwhelmed by all of the virtual digital stuff coming at us. One mother told me she has 3 kids, and each of them has like 4 or 5, you know, they're in middle school and high school, so 4 and 5 accounts and teachers emailing them, right? So how do you keep track of, you know, 15 different communications from the kids from the schools? And the teacher contact is really so hugely valuable and so important. And one of the first things I recommend is that parents reach out to their teachers, their children's teachers, and really ask for recommendations. That hasn't been necessary up to this point because parents are hearing a lot from teachers, but teachers take their own summer breaks and schools close. And so communicating around teacher references for the summer could be helpful. But you know, when it comes to sharing information, we trust our friends, right, and our families, and whereas we might used to gather around the playground while the kids were playing and be able to share ideas, we can't do that as well anymore. So really, it's I really think it's helpful to reach out to other parents and say, like, here's something I found that's working. You know, what have you found? What are you doing? And have a little sharing dialogue. Excuse me.
No, that's okay. I've also had some, I'm part of some these huge Facebook groups, like mommy pages that are just, you know, full of all kinds of, there's just all kinds of information that, you know, you're on Facebook anyway. I think that would be a smart place to, or many parents are, especially during all this, you know, time spent online. So I think that would be a good place to also share it.
And I think it's important, you know, for parents to feel okay identifying one or two or three things, right? Um, we we can't and shouldn't be expected to do everything, right? And what we're all feeling overwhelmed and anxious and stressed, and we likely will, unfortunately, for a longer period of time, right? The truth is we don't know what the summer is going to look like, and we don't know what the fall is going to look like in terms of schools opening on time, operating more or less normally or not. In fact, with my own children's school, the superintendent, after a recent school board meeting, sent us sort of a preview of the fall. And she said, there are three options for how we'll open again in September. And I have to tell you guys, none of those three options were normal school as we know it. You know, that doesn't, at least here, even seem to be on the table. The closest thing to normal was that kids would go to school and they would have classes, but not all day, every day, the way they used to. So there might be some, you know, a change in the schedule. So if you think that we're in this for the long haul, and the last 2 months have already felt like a long haul, you know, it's really important to sort of get your hands around the 2 or 3 things you can do. And that's what those 9 principles are about. It's sort of boiling all of this noise down to 9 tips, basically. And 9 is probably too many. I had an earlier draft that was just 3 things. But bring it down to a couple of ideas and feel okay and empowered, really focusing on those couple of things. Don't try to do it all. You know, your kid doesn't need you to do it all, and it's impossible to do it all. You know, and at the end of the day, number 8 there and number 9, remember your kid's social and emotional needs. I mean, that really is more important. You know, be able to sort of check in with your kid day to day and make sure they're doing okay. You know, what sort of stress are they feeling about not seeing their friends, or about what they're seeing on the news, or about not having access to a teacher? I mean, that is stressful in their lives as well. But then number 9, parents, take care of yourselves. I mean, you know, it's easy to say we should do that and not do it, right? But we need to keep ourselves healthy so we can keep our kids healthy. And again, it's not, in my view, for the next couple of weeks. You know, it's the long view. So there's actually in there some stuff about you know, parents having time for a little bit of daily exercise. You know, parents laugh when I say this, but try to get, you know, a good bit of sleep every night. They laugh because no one's getting enough sleep. You know, but some mindfulness where you're reflecting on the things that matter the most to you in your daily life and how to go about them. You know, it is just so true that in order to love our children, to take care of our children during a time of crisis, we have to have some time to keep ourselves healthy as well.
So we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to wrap up with some announcements. But before we do that, I want to give Kim and Matthew a chance to share any final last thoughts with our group.
I'm just really thankful, Matthew, that you came up with this book that is so thoughtful and just this a true one-stop shop of such an array of things for us to do, and something to make me feel like I'm not gonna have a kiddo who is just languishing, over the next couple months. And I appreciate it, and it's just in time too. It's great.
Well, thanks. And I see this as the beginning of a whole new way of thinking about the world. And I mean, I think this pandemic is going to change our society in ways that we don't yet fully understand. And we're not at the end of this story just because we sort of went through the first wave and are opening up. We're probably, in chapter 1 of 10 chapters. And so I see the engagement with parents and the book in particular as the starting point for a broader conversation, which is a long way of saying I would just love to engage in dialogue with folks, hear from folks, what's working, what's not working, what challenges are there, and how how we can sort of put our heads together and think together about moving forward, even during this uncertainty.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Matthew. Hopefully, I hope that you all found this webinar informative. I put a number of links into the chat box, links to the pre-order for Dr. Boulay's book. There was a question about whether it'll be available for purchase in Canada.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. So just to wrap up with a few other announcements, you'll see in the chat box as well, there is a link to our Voices of Summer webinar series. This is a great series we've had on a number of different topics, including virtual learning, family engagement. We're having a number of webinars coming up, so be sure to check that out to see what is next for us. And the webinars also include a lot of really great examples from programs around the country, sharing what they are learning and what they're doing for this summer.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yes. The other thing I'll mention is, as I said, the link to this recording and the slides will be shared. And again, I just want to say thank you again for attending today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, weekend, and summer. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.